Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for giving me your morning. Is anybody else really tired and underslept right now? Yeah? Okay. We're going to do this, and we're going to do it with energy. So we are here to talk about the Muse, and I, as you know, am a writer, I'm an actor, I'm a director, and I'm a dramaturg, which means script editor. So I do a lot of work helping people develop new theater. I work exclusively in new theater. If somebody wants to put on a new production of King Lear, that's great. I am not the person to help them do that. I am the person to help people take their vague ideas and their stories and shape that into something that can be done on stage. And I've done this with unknown people, and I've done this with Richard Dreyfuss. And I enjoy doing it immensely. And I teach a course on doing this. And I do it with myself. I do one-person shows. And I'm going to be doing my newest one tonight at the Fire Hall Theater, just blocks from here. And I can tell you more about that. And the Vancouver Fringe is on, so you should totally check that out. I'm involved in 3 shows as director and dramaturg and performer. So I'm here to talk about the Enneagram, or a subtopic of the Enneagram. And before I do that, I'm just curious, does anybody here know the Enneagram or has ever heard the word before? A lot. Okay. The Enneagram is a personality typology. The word means 9-sided shape. Ennea is Greek for the number 9. So the thesis behind the Enneagram is that there are 9 basic personality types. A lot of people who look into the Enneagram stop there. You know, their interest goes into, there's 9 types of personalities, what's my type? And then they do a test, and then they find out what their type is. And then they read all about their type or the type of their partner. And of their various exes over the years. And I'm not excluding myself from this list because that's absolutely what I did when I first got into the Enneagram. And then let's learn all about me, and here's how I am, and isn't that great? And you can use it like that, and that's how people generally use Myers-Briggs, and that's how they use most types of personality types. That is not the actual purpose of the Enneagram. The purpose of the Enneagram isn't to park yourself into 1/9 of human experience. Because if you do that, that will be valuable in 1 out of 9 situations. The point of the Enneagram is that nobody is one-dimensional. Nobody is one set of characteristics 100% of the time. We're influenced by all kinds of things, day to day, moment to moment, our family, our culture, our birth order, everything. And we tend to have default settings. We have a certain set of strategies that we come back to again and again, especially when we're stressed. And we do these things because that's who we believe we really are, and we do them even when they're not helpful. Even when they're actively making things worse. Because that's who I am, and that's what I do, and that's that. And the message of the Enneagram is that's not who you are. That's just how you're reacting and how you've been conditioned to react. And if you can be aware of what your shadow patterns are, you can recognize them, and you can step outside of them, especially as they're happening. If you put in a lot of work to do this, it's not easy, it doesn't happen overnight, and then you can maybe make a different choice. So the 9 personalities is not what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm here to talk about a different aspect, kind of a subtopic of the Enneagram, which I think is just as fascinating and actually more easy to apply than the 9 personality types, which is the 3 instincts. And my girlfriend and partner, Lindsay Robertson, she's a singer-songwriter, she's a counselor. She and I do a workshop on how these 3 instincts relate to the creative process. And this talk is a 20-minute condensation of a full-day workshop. So let's do this. So every one of us has these 3 instincts. Doesn't matter what your personality type is. If you know your Enneagram type, that's great. You also have these 3 instincts. In fact, all mammals have these 3 instincts. That's how you know something's one of the 3 instincts, because all mammals do these things. Each of us does not have them in equal measure. Or at least we have them, we just tend to have a default setting of there's one of the 3 instincts that we do a lot. And we quite often overdo it. And this makes this instinct and the things of this instinct, the priorities of this instinct, very prominent in our awareness as we go about our day. There's one of the 3 instincts that we will have fairly well balanced. We don't overdo it. We don't underdo it. It's just kind of there. It takes care of itself in a generally healthy way. And then there's one instinct that we underdo, and that is our blind spot. It tends not to occur to us to do it. We tend to avoid it. We tend to think that I'm not good at that, or I'm not allowed to do that, or that nobody should do that thing, or that thing is not interesting. And buried beneath that lack of interest is a deep layer of shame, which is not easy to access. So how this relates to creativity is that all three instincts are needed for creative action. And all three of these things will help us. And the journey of being a creative person, and just being a healthy human being, involves finding a balance between these instincts and learning how to apply them. So let's dive right in. And this is not the order that they're generally taught in. This is the order that they relate to creativity. So the first instinct is sometimes called the activating instinct, sometimes called the sexual instinct, although that word can really scare some people because they apply it to sexuality, which is not necessarily the case. So let's just go with the activating instinct. This is the instinct that is all about activating our energy. What lights you up? How do you turn on your taxi light? What are the things that make you go bing? And some of us overdo this. Some of us are looking for this all the time. Where's the energy? Where's the thing that's going to light my fire? Where's the thing that's going to excite me? And this breaks down into 3 subcategories. So somebody who has this as their top instinct is probably going to specialize in one of these 3 sub-areas. First area, edge exploration. So this is our instinct to take risks, to go into those dark places on the map. And this might be very simple and literal. This might be world travel. This might be adventure activities or extreme sports. This might also be going for a hike or going for a hike off the trails. You can also do this without ever leaving your front door. This is artistic creation altogether. Because a blank page is terra incognita. A blank canvas is the unknown. And if you dare to step into the creative arena, you are going where you have never gone before, even if it's something you've done before, it's a medium you've done before. If I'm a novelist who's written 20 novels and I want to write a new one, I don't know where this is going to go, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off, and it is scary. And that's what makes it exciting. If it's not frightening, it's just the same old, same old. So there's this impulse to push into the darkness, to see what is out there, to see what I can do, to see where I can get. So that's one sub-instinct of it, one sub-area of that. Another one, broadcast and display. So this is our inclination to fan our peacock tail. And we might do this in a number of ways. We might do this with our appearance. We might do this with our intelligence. We might do this with our creativity, our humor, our power, our charisma, maybe all of the above. But it's the way we just go, hey world, this is what I got. What do you think? So this can play out in terms of outrageous appearance. You'll see this in the world of music a lot. Lady Gaga, Bjork, Beyonce, somebody who just goes bing. You might see a totally unknown person walking down the street, but something about them just makes you go, whoa. And that is not a coincidence. They want that. They dressed deliberately to get that reaction. They've molded their lives to get more of that juice. The third area of this instinct is fusion. And this is our desire to be locked in a tiger's gaze with whatever it is that activates our energy. So this might be a really good book. And you know the kind, we've all had this experience, not the kind where it takes you a month to read and you kind of forget that you've even got it and then you notice it, oh yeah, that. No, I'm talking about one of those books that as soon as you open it, a hand comes out of that book and grabs you and pulls you into that book. And it is so good that I'm just going to read to the end of this chapter because I've got things to do. And when you get to the end of the chapters, I'm just going to read one more page. Just one. Oh, okay, I'll just read one. Okay, fuck it. I'll just read this book all day. And then it's like 800 pages and I've got things to do and I'm canceling them because I can't wait to find out what happens next. And as soon as it's done, what do? I re-enter the world and it's like I've got the bends. And then what do? I find someone and I say, read this book. And they say, it's 800 pages. And I'm like, I don't care, read it. Why? Because it has activated my energy. So wanting to be plunged into the zone like that. And that can happen with a movie you watch again and again, a song you listen to at full blast, a video game you play all night long and you don't notice that you're playing it all night long. It could also be a good, deep, powerful, intense one-on-one conversation. Ever see that at a party? It's a big, loud party and there's two people on the couch who are talking so intently that it's as if the rest of the party isn't even there. And you could not interrupt if you tried. And their conversation might be changing their lives because they are activating each other's energy. We all crave this. We all enjoy this. Some people live there and compulsively seek this out. So how does this relate to creativity? Apart from how I mentioned before, risk-taking is creative action. This is inciting the muse. We tend to think of inspiration as something mystical. I mean, the muse is a mythological reference. It's almost like this comes from some divine external source, and we have no control over when we get inspired. It just happens, and when it does happen, we either choose to submit to it and create or not. I believe that this is not the case. I believe we can make this happen. Each of us can find things that excite us. What gets your wheels turning? And you can deliberately do it. When you need inspiration, you can jumpstart it. For me, a walk in nature. As quiet and serene as that seems, something about doing that for me, with no headphones on, with no person there, with no destination in mind, and I live right by Stanley Park, it's very available to me, so I do this all the time, is I'll have a creative problem, or I've got something that I'm trying to do, or something I can't unlock in something I'm writing, and I'll just go for a walk, and that's when the wheel's turning, and just like a toaster pops partway through, bing, I've got my idea, and then I run home and write it. Or it might be reading the work of a favorite author, or it might be watching a favorite movie again, or listening to a certain song, something that gets me in the zone. So it's going to depend on each person how this relates to you and how you do this. Another quick thing about this instinct, somebody who specializes in this, the unhealthy aspect of that, burnout, overcommitment. Always saying yes to too many things, having a hard time finishing what I start. Having a hard time getting adequate rest because I can't sleep because my mind is just firing because there's all these things that excite me and I'm so inspired all the time. I'm so juiced, I'm so jazzed that I never really refresh myself. If this is somebody's blind spot, that usually shows up as a certain risk aversion, a tendency to make the responsible choice. There's this thing I'm passionate about, but I've never really put my body into it. And there's a part of me that sees other people doing it and resents them. Because who do they think they are? Who's that big show-off? But the reason I resent them is because it activates my shame. That sense that if they're living large like that, that means I could too, and I'm not. And that makes me believe that I'm boring. But it doesn't have to be like that. That's a belief, and it's not the truth. So the next instinct number 2, the preserving instinct, also called self-preservation. Enneagram people call this self-pres. And this is our basic physical well-being, our creature comforts, our relation to our environment. And this is common not just to all mammals, but to all living beings. We all have the need to survive and thrive. So this plays out in one of 3 areas. First area, health. So health includes your diet, your exercise, your sensitivity to your signals from your body, and to your environment. So some people, and I imagine some people here right now, pack a snack with them wherever they go, and a bottle of water. Because what if I get hungry? What if I get thirsty? It's really going to bother me. Even if I come to Creative Mornings, and of course they feed us here, but still, what if they run out of food? What if it's not enough? What if it's not what I like? What if it's not the thing that I'm looking forward to? I've got my snack just in case. It'll make me feel better to have that there. Or this plays out in exercise too. Somebody might be a gym rat. They might never go to the gym, but there's this sense of like listening to my body. And if I don't exercise enough, I'm aware of it and I'm giving myself shit for it. Or there's sensitivity to the room. People who specialize in this instinct are quite often the first person to open a window or to close a window, or to be very annoyed if somebody closes the window that I opened. Or to be the one who's at the thermostat, or to be really annoyed if there's a plastic cover over the thermostat, and if there's a lock on it, I will find a way to open that lock and open that thing because I want to be the right temperature. And in addition to my snack and my bottle of water, I've also got a sweater in my bag in case it's too cold. So the second area for the preserving instinct is resources. How attuned are we to how stocked our cupboard is in our fridge? How much money I have in my wallet? How much money I have in my bank? And this actually has very little relation to how wealthy we are. Because somebody could be a millionaire and they're very anxious about having enough money. And they're going online and they're checking their bank balance every single day. And they know when the bills are coming due, and they know when the mortgage payment's coming due or the rent, and they're making sure they have enough money for that. And I want to make my payment before the interest comes in on my credit card, and I know when my investments are coming in, and I know when my taxes due, and I'm very aware of this. It probably causes me a lot of anxiety because I'm worried there's not going to be enough. I'm stockpiling things. I'm getting insurance. I'm making sure that the resources are there for me when I need them. And the third area for the preserving instinct is domesticity. It's my relation to my living space, my home. What does my place need to feel like home? Does the word home give me that nice warm feeling inside? Do I like my home to be exactly the way I want it to be? How is it lit? How does it smell? How is it painted? How is it decorated? How is it arranged? Can I change it? Do I have control over it? Is there any danger that I'm going to be evicted? Can I do the renovations that I want? Is there noise from the neighbors? All of these things so that my home is just where I like to be, and that's where I feel okay. So how does this relate to creativity? This is seeing it through. How can I set up my living conditions to foster my creativity? One way to do that, being well-fed, being healthy, getting the right amount of sleep. It's not really part of our connection, our concept of how an artist lives is somebody who gets a good night's sleep. But what if that good night's sleep is deliberately planned because tomorrow I've got a full day of doing my creative thing and I don't want to do it on 2 hours sleep. I want to be rested. I want to be ready. I want to be refreshed. I want to have the food ready there so I don't have to worry about that. And now I am ready to go. Or it might be how we set up our living space. So it might be having a clean desk. It might be having a room or a den or a shed or something like that. And that's my creative space. And when I go in there, now I'm in the zone. And it's set up just the way I like. And I've got a picture of my favorite artist on the wall there. And I've got my bookshelf with all my favorite books there. And they are inspiring to me. And that's what supports my creativity. Or maybe it's finding funding. You know, because some art forms are very cheap to practice, some are very expensive. So how good am I at finding funding sources so I can make my stop motion animation feature? Which I'm going to put on YouTube, and it probably won't make me any money at all, but it takes resources to do it. It feels good to do, so that's how I'm going to do it. Am I going to fundraise? Am I going to get grants? Am I going to work a really high-paying job and set aside the money for that? Whatever it is, it's managing that. And without that, I'm not going to be able to see my projects through. So the activating instinct is the spark. It's what gets things going. The preserving instinct is how I turn that spark into not only a fire, but a nice, steady, glowing bed of coals. The preserving instinct is endurance. How can I see my project through? So somebody who overdoes this instinct might be really neurotic and fussy about their living space, about their resources, about their food, about all these things. They can make them really anxious because there's this underlying fear that there won't be enough, that my needs won't be met. Somebody who underdoes this, somebody who has this as their blind spot, might forget to eat. It's not like they're dieting. It's just it doesn't even occur to them that they need to eat. And then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, it's 12 hours. What happened? Or they forget to sleep. Or they forget to pay their bills. It's just not on my radar. And similarly, if I'm around somebody who really has to have not just a coffee, but a coffee from this specific place, and it takes them 10 minutes to order that coffee, and by the time it's finally delivered to them, they stir it, and they add a little bit of honey, and they add a little bit of the alternative sweetener, and then they smell it, and then they stir it again, and then they taste it, and then they send it back because it's not good enough. The person with this as their blind spot is watching them thinking, what the hell is wrong with you? Just get a coffee from 7-Eleven. Who cares? It's just coffee. So again, or somebody who's really fussy about their money. That can be easy to resent. Somebody who's nickel and diming all the time. It can seem like that if this isn't my wheelhouse, if I've never been good at finances, if I don't pay attention to this, if it's abstract to me, Because the shame for this instinct, if it's your blind spot, is I'm just a little kid. I've got a grown-up's body, and I don't know how to do all these grown-up things. And maybe I'll never know. Or maybe somebody will come into my life and they'll take care of all of this for me. Or maybe they'll come into my life and then they'll get sick of me because I'm just a little kid, and then they'll leave me and I'll be even worse than before. Again, that is a belief. It's not a law of nature. And anybody can get better at these things. Anybody can deliberately focus more attention to this, especially if it's in the service of something they really want, like a creative project. And the third instinct is the navigating instinct, sometimes called the social instinct, but it's easy to get confused from that because social can be confused with extroversion. Somebody who specializes in the navigating instinct is not necessarily an extrovert or an introvert. A teacher of mine phrased the epitome of this instinct really well. He said, have you ever been to a restaurant and the server knows exactly what you need without you having to say? Not in terms of what you want to order, but just some servers are very good. They've got that radar. It's perfectly focused to this person wants to be flirted with, and this person wants to be left alone. And this person wants some attention right now, not 5 minutes ago, not 30 seconds from now, right now. And this person wants this and that person, and they just know, and they tune in, and they do that. And they do it seemingly effortlessly. So the navigating instinct is our ability to navigate the social world, to read energy and to respond appropriately. So, unsurprisingly, this breaks down into 3 zones. First zone, reading cues. Reading verbal cues and reading nonverbal cues. Some people are really good at that. Some people can walk into a dinner party and know right away that the couple throwing this dinner party had a big fight before we all got here, and they're pretending they didn't, but they very clearly did, and they talk about it with their partner as soon as they leave, and the partner said, really? They had no idea. How could you not know? It's so obvious to them because they're very attuned to reading social signals. And within that same environment, they might immediately know who's the most popular or most powerful person in the room. Whose jokes are people laughing a little too loud at? Or they know that there's some tension between those two people, or there's an attraction between those two people, or this person has a history with that, or this person is lying to me right now. It's like it's just written on their face. They got a spidey sense about this. Second area for this, bonding and affiliating. So this is creating and maintaining the ties that bind. This is social ritual and our desire and inclination to engage in them. So this is a parent and a child making funny faces and playing with each other. This is very common to all mammals. All mammals learn by play. And if we didn't have the attention and the attunement of a parent, we don't survive, much less learn how to be human beings. So children learn how to speak by play. They learn how to walk. They learn how to interact. They learn all kinds of things. And this never stops. So bonding and affiliating continues with like kids playing pretend with each other, or playing soccer, or adults playing soccer, or adults playing Settlers of Catan, or gathering around and chatting about the weather, or about the new Marvel Comics movies, or about the Canucks, or whatever it is, small talk, basically. Very few people stand up for small talk. Very few people will tell you, you know what I enjoy? You know what my favorite kind of talk is? Small talk. Everybody will say they can't stand small talk. Well, then who's doing it? All of us. Because the function of small talk is checking in. The subtext of all small talk is, how are you? Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Are we all okay? Are we all okay together? Because if the worst thing happening in any of our lives is that the Canucks didn't make the playoffs, that means on a fundamental level, we're okay. And we're okay together. And isn't that great to be okay together? Third area for the navigating instinct. Contributing and participating. And this doesn't mean automatically contributing and participating in everything. This means being aware of what this means in any given situation. So if I'm going to join a workplace, if I'm going to join a new group of friends, if I'm going to join an organization, what does that mean? What's expected of me? What are the rules? How do people comport themselves? Can these people be trusted? Is there reciprocity? If this is my top instinct, and I noticed that at one point in this group, this person really needed a favor, and this person did that favor for them, and then this person needed a favor, and this person didn't return that favor, okay. Duly noted. There's a strong awareness of this, so I don't just leap into things, I check it out first. So how this relates to creativity is involving other people. Many forms of creativity are collaborative in their inherent nature. Some are not. Some are entirely solitary. But no matter how solitary of an artist you are, there comes the point where you are sharing it with other people. Other people as collaborators, as mentors, as teachers, or as the audience, or as the overall community. And the better you're able to tune into that, the more you're able to make this an endeavor that's more than just me. So people who have this as their top instinct might be overdoing this. They might be socializing so much they're never actually doing their creative work. Or maybe they're involved in an organizational capacity, or they're volunteering and they're supporting everybody else's creativity and they're never doing their own thing. Somebody who has this as their blind spot has an inherent belief that I'm not good at that kind of thing and I don't want to be around other people, and in fact it's better to not be around people. Again, there's this annoyance of people who are social butterflies. They're superficial, they're not doing the real creative work. When in fact there's this shame that I wouldn't be accepted. So why should I even try? And yet again, not a law of nature. So some of you, I imagine, might have heard one of these instincts and thought, that's the one I overdo. And some of you might have heard one of these instincts and thought, that one is my blind spot. If that is the case, you will get the most bang for your buck by coming up with specific practices to work on your blind spot. And they're going to be specific to you. They're going to be different from what I've done. I'm happy to talk about it. Like I said, this is a short version of a full day workshop, and there's a lot to this. There's a lot more than I have time to talk about right now. But ultimately, as I said, all of these are needed in creative work. A healthy, balanced relationship with these instincts will contribute to a full, rounded person. Somebody who can be inspired when they need to be inspired, when they need to get started. Somebody who can see their work through. And someone who knows exactly who to involve and in what ways and when to bring them in. Can see their stuff through, can share it with the world, can get them mirroring from sharing their inner creative work with the world and turn that into a virtuous circle and inspire others. Wow. Thank you very much.
Okay, TJ. People, I think, probably have questions for you. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's talk.
This is where you get to ask all the hard stuff. Over here. Can you just stand up and tell us your name?
I can speak loudly. I don't think I need to. Can you all hear me? No? Okay. All right, fine. My name is Alisa, and my question for you, TJ, is there any evidence behind what you've talked about? Any research into it? That kind of thing?
There is. I have not looked into it myself. But this was developed by developmental psychologists.
Thank you.
But I can't point you towards the research, unfortunately.
Interestingly, that reminds me of other sort of similar systems. Like Myers-Briggs has no science behind it. None. It's a mother and a daughter who borrowed some ideas from some indigenous culture in Native American traditions, wrote a book, and suddenly there was a personality test. DISC does have science behind it, not deep science. So it's interesting that these systems keep coming out about how to understand the human experience and all of this. And there's a lot of science around the psychology, but weirdly not often so directly tied to how we identify once we go like, oh yeah, I'm a this in this platform. So it is something to be aware of. It doesn't negate the value though.
Thanks, Mark. Fabulous talk. Thank you so much. Karen Zaninga, sorry. Have you ever applied this same thinking to organizations? Because I feel like they behave similarly and have similar, I don't know if we call it shame, but similar problems.
Oh, yeah. My partner and I do workshops with corporate groups. And in less than a week, I'm going to be flying to the Hamptons in New York to talk to a pharmaceutical investment company to tell them about how this applies to group dynamics. Because any group is ultimately going to coalesce into a single personality, even though there's divergent people within that group. So that would apply to a corporation, that applies to a group of friends, that applies to anything. There's going to be a dominant instinct within that group, and there's going to be a blind spot within that group. And the group will thrive and suffer because of that imbalance. And it actually can be the undoing of it. And that's going to be part of my talk, is I can look back before I knew this stuff to groups I was a part of and see how they fell apart and realize, oh, that's because of this element. That's because of my social blind spot and everybody else's social overdoing it. Or the navigating instinct, or my emphasis, the instinct that I over-identify with is the activating instinct. The rest of the group, that was their blind spot. So that resulted in a lot of people chatting and a lot of jokey email threads. Not too many people doing the writing, and I was doing the exact reverse. I know this now, I didn't know that then.
You were doing the reverse and that you were...
I was doing a lot, it was a blog that I was doing. It was a group ideas blog, and there were 7 of us as the main writers. And I was writing and writing and writing and writing and writing and writing, and they were chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting. And the more they chatted, the more I hated them. And my strategy to get them to write more was to shame them by writing so much and such good stuff that they would want to come to my level. Didn't work. Didn't work at all. It made things a lot worse. Groups I've been in since where I've known this, I've introduced it, and it's just part of our common language. That changes everything. Because then we understand this about each other. And we're aiming this, my partner and I, we studied this together. So this is part of our daily, I'm not exaggerating, our daily language as a couple is understanding when she's overdoing the preserving instinct or when I'm overdoing the activating instinct or all of these things.
Sorry, doesn't that hit on the shame bucket stuff?
It-
You're blind spotting on the preserving instinct, being like, oh, it's because you think you're still a child. Like, doesn't that like, wow?
It can, yeah. It depends on how it's done.
Yeah.
Is it done with love? Is it done with compassion?
Yeah.
Is it done with understanding? Is it part of a respectful conversation rather than an accusation?
TJ, did this
Yeah.
work come before your involvement in theater or as a result of involvement in theater? And what's the relationship between the two?
After. I've been doing theater of the kind that I do for 25 years. And I discovered this. I got into the Enneagram 10 years ago, and then I started studying, and it was through, and here's a weird thing. There are books about the Enneagram out there, and you can find them at chapters. You don't have to go to Banyan Books, although Banyan Books has a whole Enneagram shelf. But within all of the Enneagram books there are, and I've got a lot of them, very few of them even mention the instincts. And the ones that are written by my teachers, and my teachers are Russ Hudson and Don Riso, and they've co-written what I think is the best book on the Enneagram, which is The Wisdom of the Enneagram. It's big and it's blue and it costs about $25. The instincts are barely in it at all. And what is in there doesn't flesh it out like the talk that I just gave. I learned this from studying from them in person, and that was in 2013. So that was not that long ago. And since then, it's been astounding to me of how simple this is and how not talked about it is within Enneagram circles, much less in the world at large. So anyway, what led me to this is the fact that, as I mentioned, the navigating instinct, the social instinct is my blind spot. I make my living creating theater, which is an inherently social activity. But I do one-person shows with no collaborators. That's very much the mark of someone with a blind spot in this instinct. And I would do this in festivals. Festivals are inherently social environments. And at fringe festivals, you're not at a hotel, you're staying in someone's guest room. So again, you're like, no privacy. And my shows always did well. I got great reviews, I had the respect of my peers. The interaction I had with friends and strangers was 99% of the time somebody coming up to me and telling me they loved me. And my ego could spin that as, I don't belong. My success separates me from everybody else. I'm not welcome where the other performers gather. Nobody understands me. The locals know each other. The other touring groups know each other. And I was backing myself out of this world that I was theoretically thriving in. And that's what got me looking into the Enneagram. And that's what got me learning about this thing and realizing, oh yeah, these are just stories I've been telling myself. It's not how I need to be. And it actually has very little connection with external reality.
Interesting. I have a question here. I know it's going to be good. That's 3 women in a row. Any men got something burning? Or is this too touchy-feely for you guys? Corey, are you uncomfortable? Feelings? You're good, right? Okay. All right.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Sarah. I'm just wondering, so you sort of apply the instincts and the Enneagram to your creative process. Do you ever apply it to your characters, or when you're working as a dramaturg to your, the playwright's characters, and sort of have them run through the instincts and the personality types with the characters that they're developing? And how does that come into play?
I only do that about 99% of the time. Yeah. With character, it's a great way to create characters. It's a great way to direct people. I use it in my creative work in that way in a number of ways. I usually work one-on-one with people on a one-person show. So understanding who they are is usually an element of the show they create, whether it's directly about them or not. And like I said, the purpose of the Enneagram and learning your personality type isn't to give yourself a list of characteristics that describe you and box you in. It's to learn about your shadows and your favorite flavor of self-sabotage. And then once you know that, you can spot that pattern that goes all the way back to childhood, and all these seemingly disparate things go whoosh. And that is the stuff of a good story. So there's that. And then when I'm writing about fictional characters or working with people who are, it's a matter of understanding who is this person behind the surface? What are they really motivated by? To step out of the instincts for a second and into the types. Type 8 in the Enneagram is the challenger. And challengers are tough and assertive and loud, and they take up space and they get in your face, and they've got a salty sense of humor, and if you don't like it, that's your fault. Toughen up, bitch. Oh, yeah? That's the way they operate in the world. And it's very easy to look at somebody like that and think that they're made of stone, to think that they can't be hurt. And what I've learned from studying the Enneagram and from the personal testimony of friends of mine who study the Enneagram and people who go to the conferences who identify as that particular type is behind that lusty, loud, assertive surface is a deep tenderness and sensitivity and a desperate fear that somebody's going to hurt me. So that's why I thump my chest all the time. If you didn't know that about somebody, if you only knew them from the surface, it's much easier to write a character who's a caricature of toughness. And not to understand that beneath that toughness is there for a reason. It's a suit of armor around this deep tenderness. And a dynamic element of that character, and I've seen this in fiction all the time and in real life, is somebody who's like that, who then has a child or a pet or somebody they've taken under their wing. This ooey gooey tenderness comes out of them. And I just saw a picture a friend posted on social media yesterday of Randy Macho Man Savage from World Wrestling Entertainment. And he's holding a kitten with 3 legs. Oh. And there's a part of that personality type that's like, nobody is going to mess with this tender, beautiful little being. Because there's a part of them that recognizes, I am a tender, beautiful little being. And when I was a child, somebody messed with me. And that's why I built up these walls so that that would never happen again. So that's one example. That's one type out of 9. And those are the conversations I have in abundance when I'm working on fictional characters as well as real characters. And I've worked with actors like this. How do you come up with a performance that isn't one-layered for a character? How do you work with a given actor if you know that actor is that given personality type? What's the most effective way to communicate with them? Or the stage manager, or all the people in the organization. How do we keep ourselves from killing each other? Or from driving each other crazy? How do we untangle the fact that this is my shit that I'm projecting into the world? So yeah, it's valuable on multiple levels.
Hi, I'm Matt Dobo. I'm wondering, my question is about One Man Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
I saw that it was really awesome.
Oh, thanks.
I was wondering, what was your muse or inspiration for that performance, and are you still performing it? Can we still see it somewhere sometime?
That's curious. Okay, you've seen it.
Yeah.
How long ago?
It must have been 2014, maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay, I directed it, but I wasn't in it.
Okay.
But the guy who does it and we get mistaken for each other.
Yeah, I think I'm confused.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the story. Charlie Ross, the guy who does it, he's based in Victoria. He and I went to UVic together. We were UVic theater students. And he's 6'3", and he can grow a beard. And he could do this from the time he was 18. And in the early 90s, in the full-on grunge years in Victoria, his clothing of choice every single day, a suit. In a different suit every day, so he looked older than he was. So when he was cast in scenes and in plays, he was cast as the king. He was the duke. He was the priest. He was the grandfather. He was the heavy. And I knew him backstage, and I knew him in acting class in the hallways. And what I knew about him was that there is nobody that I've ever met or seen in any media who's better with sound effects and physical pantomime and who loves making people laugh. And his knowledge of Star Wars eclipsed even mine, and that is saying something. So years into us being friends, after we graduated, I said to him, you have to do a one-man Star Wars show. Nobody could do this better than you, because it was looking into who he is and saying, this is a talent you have, and he resisted it. He wanted to be on stage with friends. He didn't think he could do it. He didn't think people would be interested. Here's the thing about me. Both of my parents are teachers. They met getting their master's degrees in education. I'm not a teacher. Well, sort of. I teach a course on one-person shows at Langara, and I teach workshops. I've only come to this in my 40s, because I resisted it for a long time because I didn't want to be my dad. But now that I look back on my relationship with Charlie, and now by extension with everybody I work with, whether it's on a one-person show or in a workshop, that's what that is looking into who somebody really is and saying, I see something in you. And I want that to cultivate. And Charlie and I, since doing One Man Star Wars, and he's done this around the world, by the way. He makes his living, he pays his mortgage, traveling the world, recreating the Star Wars trilogy on stage with his voice and body, with no technical cues, with no props, with no costume changes. You can see clips of this on YouTube. He's done parts of it on the Today Show, on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. He was the feature entertainer at Simon Cowell's 50th birthday party in London. He's done runs off Broadway. He runs in London's West End at the Sydney Opera House. He's toured Malaysia doing this. He lives in Victoria. This is what he does now, and we've since done One Man Lord of the Rings, One Man Dark Knight, One Man Stranger Things, and this summer we debuted One Man Avengers. So we're still doing it, and he's still amazing.
I bet you his performance would make more sense than that movie did. Anyway, you had a question. I still don't know what was going on, and I've seen most of the films. You're good?
Yes, no.
You still, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Okay. Feel like I'm giving that back to most of you. Sorry about that. Vivian, hi, I'll sit down now so I can see. My question is you mentioned a lot about like the stressors of being intense in one sort of instinct. As you were talking about that, I was like, yeah, check. Number 2, yeah, check. Number 3, yeah, check. There's a lot of risk of burnout and stuff like that, right? So have you ever considered the creative aspects of being high in a certain instinct? Like, is that something you talk about in your workshop? Like when you have so much of one instinct, is there a healthy way to channel that energy without like blowing up in pieces in the process?
Yes, definitely. Each of the 3 instincts has its own advantages in terms of creativity, and even there can be creative action that happens within the realm of that instinct. So, somebody who's got preserving as their top instinct, they will often create things that even they themselves don't think of as creative. So, decorating their home, cooking, gardening, the way they dress, crafting. These are creative outlets. And like I said, people tend not to think of those as creative, maybe partially, unfortunately, because of misogyny that's just inherent to living in a patriarchal system, because these are thought of as women's things and women's creativity. But anybody can be creative in this way. A more traditionally masculine version of that might be woodworking or metallurgy or that kind of thing. So that's that instinct. People who specialize in the navigating instinct, the social instinct, much more likely to be involved in avenues of creativity that are in ensembles. So like a group theater company or a film. Something that involves a lot of people getting together and jamming together, a band. Like we are working together, we are all in this together. And people who specialize in the activating instinct or the sexual instinct. It's stuff that's a lot more generally explosive in nature. Or if they specialized in, like I said, broadcast and display, it might be their sexuality or their ability to dance or their ability to be one person on stage, maybe a stand-up comedian. Or it might be a novelist, somebody who's by themselves getting in the zone and it's just me and these ideas that are coming to me. So any of these can be an advantage, and any of these instincts can steer us towards a certain avenue of expression, definitely.
We're going to leave it there. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. TJ Dawe.
Thank you.